When I was in middle school, my classmates played something called the Black Envelope. The game was invented by a bunch of Russian teenagers. The village they lived in had an urban legend about a demonic entity called Nadamet. The story goes that in the early 1900s, a man from the village got drunk one night and hooked up with some random woman. 20 years later, the man was visited by a demon humanoid who claimed to be his son. It turned out that the woman he was with all those years ago was a succubus looking for some hot action, if you catch my drift. The hybrid's name was Nadamet. By then, the man was married and had 2 kids. The oldest was 14-year-old Olga, and the youngest was 12-year-old Ivan. Nadamet explained that he wanted to meet his father and become part of his family. In return, he'd protect his father's village. Not wanting anything to do with his demonic son, the man declined and told him to never show up again. Before he left, Nadamet told his father how to reach him should he need him. All he needed was an envelope, paper, and a writing utensil. The following method is how the black envelope is played. The first step is to write a message addressed to Nadamet. The second is to place the note in the envelope and seal it. You must then draw an inverted pentagram on the face of the envelope. Once the letter is ready, it must be hidden somewhere dark, like in a drawer. At 3 a.m., the envelope will vanish from its hiding place. This means that the letter has been sent to Nadamet. At dawn, a black sealed envelope will appear in the same place you've hidden your letter. Inside the black envelope will be a red piece of chalk. Once you've obtained the chalk, you must use it to draw a pentagram on the floor. By drawing the pentagram, you're opening a portal for Nadamet to access Earth. Once he arrives, you must explain what you need him to do. How long it takes for Nadamet to fulfill one's wish varies between requests. Once Nadamet completes his mission, he will return to Hell. Nadamet's father swore to never summon his unholy spawn, but that changed when the Third Reich invaded Russia. The village wasn't too close to the eastern border. Regardless, it was only a matter of time before the Germans arrived. Fearing for his village, Nadamet's father felt that he had no choice but to summon his demonic son. It's unknown just how powerful Nadamet is. All we know is that it was enough to keep the Nazis from invading the village. The teenagers posted the black envelope story on the internet. By then, the internet was relatively new. Because it was the first urban legend to appear on the internet, the black envelope gained popularity seemingly overnight. People from around the world had played it. Of course, the Russian teens were the first to try it out. According to their testimonies, the boys asked for typical teenage things: booze, money, girlfriends, you get the idea. The teenagers claimed that the black envelope worked. However, not everyone believed them. My friend Jim told me about this legend the week before we started middle school. He learned about it from an older cousin who lived in our neighborhood. Apparently, the kids in my hometown used the black envelope as some rite of passage. Around here, middle school marks the beginning of having more freedom and trust. I guess that made them feel entitled to whatever they wanted from Nadamet. I was skeptical when Jim told me about the black envelope, but one weekend I didn't have any plans. So to kill time, I decided to play the black envelope. I still wasn't convinced that Nadamet was real. To prove it, I asked Nadamet for something impossible. In my letter, I asked him to make a bear destroy Nate's bike. Nate was the bully from my school. For context, we live in a city. A bear would have to walk at least 10 miles into the city to reach Nate's house. Once I completed all the steps, I hid my letter in my closet. The next morning, I went to my closet expecting my letter to be there. But when I checked the spot where I left it, I felt my heart sink. Instead of a white envelope, a black one was in its place. My mind raced as I tried to understand how this happened. It couldn't have been my classmates. I never told anyone that I was playing the black envelope. Besides, how would they even know when I played it or where I hid my letter? With shaking hands, I picked up the black envelope and opened it. I reached into the envelope and felt something small and long inside. I hesitantly pulled the item out of the envelope. Sure enough, it was red chalk. I stood there trying to process it all. There's no way some stupid urban legend could be real, right? I called Jim and told him what happened. I expected him to admit that it was a prank, but instead, Jim got excited and told me that he'll be over soon. By the time he arrived at my house, our parents had gone out to drink. Good thing too, because I wouldn't know how to explain any of this to them. I told Jim what had happened and showed him the chalk. Jim was ecstatic when I told him what I asked Nanamet for. Nate treasured his bike, and Jim really wanted him to get his comeuppance. Since I had nothing to lose, I figured that I'd draw the pentagram. So I drew the inverted pentagram on my bedroom floor. When I was done, Jim and I stepped back. After 10 seconds of nothing, I was sure that Nanamet wasn't real. I was about to get something to clean the chalk when a blaze of fire suddenly ignited on the pentagram. When the fire went out, a red pit appeared in its place. A pale hand with claw-like nails emerged from it and gripped the edge. A horned man lifted himself out of the pit and climbed onto the floor. Jim and I watched in horror as this humanoid stood up. He was 7 feet tall, 7.5 if you include the length of his horns. His eyes were amber and cat-like. He was wearing traditional Slavic attire and had dark dragon-like wings. Jim and I stood there, gawking at the monster before us. In a Russian accent, he asked which one of us summoned him. Jim pointed at me before backing up. I couldn't believe it. Nanamet was in my house. Nanamet said that he'd read my letter and asked me about Nate. In a shaky voice, I told him about Nate and how he likes to pick on other kids. I couldn't tell Nanamet that I played his game despite not believing in him. The Cambion said that he admired my thirst for revenge. He vowed to fulfill my wish as soon as possible. Nanamet then opened my window and flew out. I watched as he soared into the horizon. After getting over the shock, I closed the window. Jim reminded me to cover the portal. Apparently it couldn't close until Nanamet used it to get back to hell. I had this rug in my room that was big enough to cover the portal, so I moved it over there for the time being. I went to bed that night, trying not to let the portal bother me. I was fast asleep when the sound of tapping woke me up. It took me about a minute to get up and realize what was happening. The tapping noise was coming from my window. It was already dawn, so I could barely see what was out there. But when I heard a familiar voice call my name, I knew exactly who it was. I opened the window, and Nanamet quietly entered my room. He told me that he'd fulfilled his duty and was ready to go home. I removed the rug from the portal, and Nanamet jumped in. The portal then disappeared, and I went back to sleep. A few hours later, I woke up and checked my phone. I saw that I got a text message from Jim. His message read, "Dude, you've got to see this." He also sent me a link to a YouTube video. I opened the link and found a video titled Bear vs. Bike. The video took place in a neighborhood at night. My jaw dropped when I saw a bear destroying a red bike. The video was being recorded from a house across the street. The house behind the bear had its lights on. Through one of its windows, I could see a freaked out Nate. Only then did I understand what was happening. The black envelope had worked. I laughed when I saw the bear chewing on the bike seat like a juicy steak. The video ended when a van from animal control appeared. Jim and I never told anyone how I was responsible for the incident, partly because no one would believe us. Also, I was worried that Nate would take his revenge on me if he found out. I'm telling you all this as a warning. Be very careful when playing the black envelope. I managed to do it without causing serious harm, but one wrong decision could have made it so much worse.